to see so many faces, especially some new ones here. So I hope we've got some interesting material for you. We've got two folks down from Canada who will be talking to us about procedures going into Canada and places to fly. I think they may be touching on that also. And then our own Chip will be talking about the return trip. So with that, we've got Leslie, we've got Jim, and of course Chip here, and they will give you their own background, and the meeting has officially started.
Go ahead again, Lee.
Okay, well, since Maureen drafted me to begin with, oh, thanks, I was going to be drinking that, yeah. And she said, oh, I'd really like to have somebody talk about the differences between flying in Canada and the US. And I said, well, that's fine, except I know about flying in Canada. I need somebody that knows about the US because I think I know the differences. So we got Chip signed up to be our expert on the FAA side, plus all of you guys will help to join in. And then I was, Jim Scott is I've been flying out of Boundary Bay Airport. All of my training was in Canada. I'm a dual citizen, grew up in Colorado, moved to Canada, and then in 2000, actually 10 days before 9/11 is when I started my flight training. And but I did it all in Canada, but of course I come to the US some. So I've kind of learned. I have an aircraft in Canada, I now live in Bellingham. So Maureen always called me thinking I know both sides. I was a flight instructor at Professional Flight Center, which is also called Pro-IFR, if anybody's heard of that, out of Boundary Bay Airport. When I was a flight instructor 20 years ago, it's expired now, but one of my very favorite flight test examiners was Jim Scott. And he was just a mentor of mine. I'm just so thrilled. He actually recently is now being employed by Pro as well as everything else he does. And I'll let you fill you in on what he does. And I noticed he was doing a seminar this Saturday for Canadian pilots flying to the US. And so I called him and I said, Jim, I'm supposed to give a talk to this pilot group in Washington about US pilots flying into Canada. Will you help me? And I didn't know he would show up. It's like, give me some of your slides, it's basically. And I said, and it would be so great if you could come. So he actually did a flight test this morning at Boundary Bay Airport in Canada, and did another flight test at Abbotsford, and then drove down and met us. So thank you very much. I will kind of moderate this, and I'll jump in with some stuff. I currently teach the ground school for private and commercial flight licenses out of Boundary Bay Airport in Canada. And I do it on Zoom, which started in COVID, but I go up there some and I'm back and forth a lot. I have a Piper Arrow that I get to fly, and it's really fun. We have been upgrading the avionics from its 1969 avionics, and so I've been learning as I fly. I fly for Angel Flight. I dug through my old jackets and stuff, and I used to fly up in Alaska on float planes. I actually got my commercial license on float planes. I flew in Juneau, Alaska, and flew for Fort Langley Air for several years, and flew for a TV show called Wings Over Canada. You probably remember that. And so those were all fun things that I've done. So I'll kind of turn it over to Jim. He's now my expert. It's so fun to have an expert. And so Jim, introduce yourself.
Well, so I've got kind of two sides to flying, the airline side. So I've flown airlines all the way up to 737s, and general aviation side. So I flew the float planes up in the Northwest Territory, Beavers and so on. And I work on a contract basis with Transport Canada, do flight testing. So I do about 150 flight tests a year. And one of the biggest issues we have right now is circuit entry procedures. It's very complicated. In fact, there's a review on it right now in Canada to simplify it. What happens is each person adds their great idea, and then before long, there's so many great ideas, nobody understands anything. And that's kind of where we're at right now. The United States, it's different. So not a whole lot of differences, but enough just to get you, on the wrong side of everybody when you land, like, what just happened here type stuff. So I do fly to the United States a fair bit. I went into about 18 airports last year, including Santa Monica and Catalina, and went through all the Class B airspace down there, San Francisco and Los Angeles and of course, we do checks into Boeing Field and then to Friday Harbor, so I get a chance to get into Class B airspace, into a busy airport. But also for Canadians, to join on the 45 and know how to join an uncontrolled airport in the United States, we do that. And then, because we're kind of up against the mountains all the time, we're having a hard time having our students do the 300 nautical mile across country. So we're going to start going to just past Eugene, a place called Hobby Field. So that's 308 nautical miles or something. Otherwise, we got to go up to a place called Vanderhoof in Canada, and we got some really steep terrain there, and we're having problems with like if you ever lost an engine, if you were not over the road, it's not good. And the other one is that as soon as there's any wind, it gets kind of lumpy flying along. And then the next thing is over the last few years we've had a lot of forest fires, and it's just really blocked those small little canyons up. So being able to go stateside is great, and we haven't been able to do that for COVID for the longest time. So we're kind of landlocked where we are in Vancouver because of the mountains and the ocean on the side. And of course, like everywhere else, we have ocean plus the Comox Air Force Base that has all the airspace, which they then put restricted zones on the United States to the south. So we're in a little triangle right now, and we're trying to get out of it. So that's why we're flying into the United States. So I sympathize on both sides. When I come down here, it's what was that again? And going up to Canada, I'm like, what was that again? And so hopefully I'll be able to just touch on the real highlights here. Most of it's the same, but a few differences. So flying to Canada, just the major differences. So just go ahead. This is just for education purposes. Like anything here is. You got to consult the actual documents. So
don't say Jim told you so or Leslie told you so.
So we have our flight supplement, which is the same as what you have down here, except for you've got piles of them. We just got one great big one, and we're talking about that. It's in font 6 or 8 or something like that. And the whole idea is you bounce around an airplane, somebody gives you a clearance, you try to find the airport, you try to find the way in, all while bouncing around. So. And I'm going to show you that system is just about gone. Like it's almost impossible now to be in compliance with some of these more complex airspaces by referring to your book in flight. You got to almost do it prior, and I'll give some hints for that.
What's the best place to procure one of those?
This one here, online. Everything's online.
Oh, okay.
And of course.
And if you have ForeFlight, you can download it onto ForeFlight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And of course. Your book here, which is online, is the same as ours here, and it defines everything. So once again, you can look at it. And then you've got your sectionals, which for all the different airports, our sectionals are fine. You know a sectional when you can go to both sides, it has a map. And then you've got your terminal area control, which is like, for instance, Seattle, as you're probably all familiar with. And then the big thing here, for VFR pilots is that's where all the hidden nuggets are on how to get around the airspace and how to go into all the little airports. Well, it's no different in Canada. Somebody was caught me. So our terminal chart for Vancouver, not only does it have everything, but then it has the real nasty bits on the other side, like where you're supposed to fly, how you're supposed to get into the airports and everything, plus this book. It starts to get complicated in the sense that you got to read the back of this chart, you got to read that book, you got to read this book. So VFR is starting to become a little bit more difficult, especially when you add in the local knowledge. So if you look at, like for instance, one of the approaches into Boeing Field, it says you go down this road until you go to this mall and call out the IKEA store. Okay? Just happened to be in Seattle. I know all the IKEA stores by memory. I'll call this one, that's the right one, isn't it? Yes. And these controllers are kind of like, you missed the store, yeah. Because, when I'm driving on the ground, they've got a key. When I'm on top, it's just gravel with, they don't put a key on the top for some reason. And we have this issue in Canada right now that a lot of people, English is their second language, and I was coming into Boundary Bay, and they said to this person, I need you to fly direct to threshold. So he headed towards the airport. He says, no, I mean the runway threshold, sorry, the railroad threshold, which is a railroad bridge, right? Not the threshold.
The trestle.
The trestle. The trestle is not the threshold. And you're talking to some guy going, are you guys nuts up there, or what's the story here, right? And the controller's probably going, oh, these stupid people. Well, stop using something which has almost dual meaning to it. But we got a lot of localized stuff up there too. So anyway, I just wanted to show you, this is into atmosphere. Now, it's not a good copy because we're not going to use it. That's VFR. It's got every chart known to man, like every arrival, and it's got everything on it. Good luck. I was there today, and I test people for the private pilot's license. They're student pilots. I said, okay, before we go up flying, I now need a briefing on this departure. And they have to brief me, well, we do this, we climb to this altitude, we contact this frequency, then we turn to this place, and then we are allowed to climb to here, and we go to this frequency. Good. Glad you knew
You're
it.
supposed to make it easy for these guys, not hard.
But I got a way around that. I got a way
Okay,
around
good.
it. I got a way around
But
it.
you scared the crap out of me
I
already.
know.
No, but I got a way around it. I got a way around it.
I was gonna file IFR if you did it.
Because I have to figure out how to get in and out of these places, right? This is the IFR. Take off, climb to whatever altitude is, 700 feet, turn to 204, and climb for 3,000 feet. But I can figure that one out. This one, not so much, right? So VFR is becoming a little bit more difficult in the congested airspaces around Vancouver and Calgary and Toronto. The rest of Canada is just wide open. It's just like, do what you want. But unfortunately for you here, you got to go through Vancouver airspace, which is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Next slide. So we're just going to touch a little bit on customs and the airspace controlled airports, and then the uncontrolled airports, and a little bit on the flight service station differences. So flying into Canada here now, of course, we're not going to spend a bunch of time on this because it's all there, but
You have to have your beaver with you, not your dog.
yeah, yes, that's right.
Here, what?
Beaver.
Oh.
Does anybody know why beaver's the big animal in Canada?
What is it?
It's on our nickel. It was because the Hudson Bay Company actually owned Canada for all intents. They had this decree where the British government used to give companies sort of like almost government rights. And one of the things the Hudson Bay Company did is they used to trade in beaver pelts. And so they used to take them from the Indians and take them over and make them into hats and stuff over in Europe and stuff.
I
So-
believe that's why Fort Vancouver down by Portland is Fort Vancouver.
Well, if you want to know a little bit of history, why we have Vancouver in Canada and Vancouver down here is that I ever heard the term 5440? There's a rock band. Well, the British government and the American government were having a little bit about who owns the west coast of North America. And the Americans' position is that we're going to take from 5440, from 54, which is Alaska, down to 40th, which is the Columbia River. And at that time they had Queen Victoria on the throne, and she didn't want to send all her troops over on this side of the world, because that's when your good friends in France decide that they're going to come in and invade you, and you have your troops somewhere else where it takes them 2 years to get back home again. So they came to this agreement that they were going to move the border to the 49th parallel. And so for the most part it worked out pretty good, except for places like Point Roberts that got kind of cut off. And so, like, hey guys, were you not thinking like you did it for Victoria, but so now you got stop in the name of the law. You're going to go past the 49th parallel for another 5 miles. You need to be customs, because this is American airspace. But they went to Queen Victoria and they said, what should we call this new territory, which is, I think she goes, I do say that it's still British area north of the Columbian River. No, ma'am, it's like a long ways away from the Columbia River. Anyway, that's why we got the name British Columbia. It's the British land north of the Columbian
Oh, you're
River.
kidding.
And
I didn't know that.
she could not get it through her head that we were nowhere close to the Columbian River. So anyway, that's where we got the term British Columbia. And then, so what happened is all the loyalists decided, maybe this wasn't a good time to stick around in the new America. So they went up north and they settled into Steveston, into Nelson, into Newest Minister, and they went to a place called Hastings Mills. And they said, what's the name of this joint? And they said, Hastings Mills. And they went, yeah, it's called Vancouver now, because they were from Vancouver. So that's how we got the name Vancouver. It was everybody that came up from Vancouver, and so it became Vancouver. So Hastings Mills
Vancouver,
became...
Washington was first then.
Yes.
Oh,
And then the
wow.
Loyalists came up and renamed the joint Vancouver.
How did Victoria get her name?
Well,
Let me guess.
It's a whole nother story.
just a little bit of history there. You know why we have our capital cities are in Victoria, Edmonton, which is real far north, Ottawa for the federal one, and Regina, and does anybody know why they're so scattered to the winds?
Well, I know why Victoria is there.
Why?
It's because when they were actually determining the border, the 49th wasn't actually established. New Westminster was the capital of British Columbia, and if they had chosen the 50th, New West would have been south of the border. But Vancouver Island, which was a separate crown colony, would always be part of Canada in the treaty, so they moved it to Victoria because it would always be safe.
And the safety is the big thing. That's why we ended up with Ottawa, because does anybody remember the Fort York attack, where the Americans came and they attacked Fort York, and we went down there and we threw some Molotov cocktails at the White House and back and forth. So these border skirmishes were such that they didn't want the capital cities on the border anymore, and that's why they moved it to Ottawa, because they figured, well, if you can find Ottawa, good luck. But this idea of coming across the ocean at night, or the Great Lakes at night, and doing raids, the raiders, right?
Okay.
So there's to put down raids, so that, yeah, it had to do with...
Thanks for that history lesson there, Jim.
Yeah, so, anyway, so you need to, in the United States, you have to file your departures and your arrivals on your new electronic system, so that you can have to sign up for that. Then you gotta phone CanPass, and you've gotta give them all that information. Now, there is a program where you can sign up for $40. You can pre-do it, and you can go up there and have all sorts of special rights where you don't have to have the airport open for customs at the time. And I'm just applying right now, and it's good for 5 years.
Is that the CanPass, or is that something different?
Well, it's a program. I haven't finished filling out forms yet. I'll let you know, but I phoned the lady 2 days ago, and I said, hey, this is super. Now, you gotta remember, when we cross the border in the United States on a long weekend, it could be like 5 hours long, or maybe that's an exaggeration, but 2 hours long, yeah, where are you going, blah, blah, blah. Or the airplane, you kind of go like this. You come down as a pilot, you kind of go, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Like we've got this special privilege of just being able to phone in and saying, yeah, we just arrived at the different countries. Well, not only at CanPass can you call in, so if you go to Boundary Bay, you go to the little holding bay and you say, hi, we're here, and they go, oh, that's great, and you know, here's your number and have a great trip. That's the extent of your customs. But they have to be open for customs that time. Now, open for customs doesn't mean they're actually physically at the airport, just means that they have enough staff that they could send somebody out from the border. If you go through the program, which you can get online, you could go at 2 in the morning and the customs might not be available, they'll still say, yeah, thanks for showing up. So it's a great program that we have. 15 seats or less, right? Now, the private pilot one is only you. The corporate one is you and 3 passengers. So, and I said, what if these passengers are like from South Yemen or someplace like that? And it doesn't matter. If they're with you, they're okay as long as they don't need visas to come to Canada.
But no passengers
If you do the private.
if you're a
Oh,
private.
wow.
It's just you. Just you. So I don't, sorry.
Your passenger can sign up for it.
That's correct. That's correct.
So
But-
if I was going up there with my wife, we'd both have to buy a
So it's
CanPass
kind of like
there.
Nexus.
It is. That's what it is. It's a nexus for
Yeah.
airplanes. And so you get a little bit of advanced knowledge. Then you got to call the United States, and you got to get your squawk code to come into Canada. So you're squawking 1200 down here, unless assigned in Class Bravo airspace or Charlie or so on. But going across the border, you're going to need an individual squawk code. So when you file your flight plan, the United States will call up to Canada and they'll coordinate and they'll give you a squawk code, and you squawk that just before you come into the border. And then on landing, make sure you call them. Go ahead.
Jim, I have a form up there that I use for crossing the border back and forth all the time, and if you want to pass it around,
Sure.
it kind of covers all of
Yeah.
those aspects. Jim actually helped me.
Well, that's super. Yeah, if you have a little check sheet.
And if anybody wants a copy of it, I can email it to them, but they might like to see it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll do it. And we'll just go on the American side here real quickly, because for us, next one.
I know, I'm trying. There we
There you
go.
go. Oh, they just. So, you know, for us, we gotta make sure we got our passport, pilot's license, medical, proof of aircraft. We gotta show aircraft usage, right? You know, because we've had issues where the customs said, well, that's great, you got an airplane, but who owns it? This guy owns it. Wow. Too bad, so sad, maybe you're stealing it, I don't know. So they wanna really see a rental form or something like
We're
that.
going north or south here?
Going into.
Coming back here.
Going to Bellingham.
Okay.
Yep. And then, of course, ADSB, but the biggest thing there is coming back, you got a call, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you arrive Bellingham without calling, they're gonna have a connection, right?
Yep.
So even though you file, they're gonna tell you that it has nothing to do with them, and they don't care, and you gotta call. And sometimes when you call, like you call Friday Harbor, they're gonna say, the ferry's coming in that time, we're not gonna be able to come out. So you gotta actually coordinate the day of. And, but with Canada, you don't have to coordinate the day of in the same sense that you're gonna call somebody and they're gonna say, yeah, Boundary Bay is open, you can go there. But when you call Bellingham, you're gonna talk to the actual person that's gonna clear you, and if he's in a grumpy mood, you know, things can be different. And people are sometimes denied point of entry into the United States just because they're not available. Friday Harbor being one of them when they're busy with the marine stuff.
So it's at the top there, excuse me, so if you're going from Abbotsford to Friday Harbour,
Mm-hmm.
do you have to check in at Bellingham?
No,
So that's what that implies, the title plan.
it says first point of entry, right?
So
Oh,
it's-
that one, this one is for Bellingham, and the reason it's for Bellingham, it was for our own students, because we don't want them flying into the United States very far at all, because they're all from central, you know, all
They're
our
gonna get turned
students
back,
are on visas, and
Yeah.
the United States really doesn't like you flying over their Whidbey Island military bases with some guy from in central Yemen, who is just going to clear customs in Friday Harbor. So this is more for our people. We want them to clear immediately. If there's any problems, because technically they're in the United States, and when we do our multi-engine training or our flight testing, we go just north of Orcas Island. And even though it's being controlled by Victoria, it's still American airspace, and we have to have our passports with us already. If we have to go to, you know, some island or to Bellingham because of a problem, we gotta be ready to clear customs. And we won't allow people that are not allowed in the United States to train in that area, because for all intents and purposes, they're already in the United States. And trust me, we've got people from all over the world now. Interesting people, but I don't know what customs would think of it if they just kind of showed up unannounced into the Whidbey Island Air Force Base. Next slide.
Can I have a comment here?
Sure.
On the previous slide, the documents section there, I came back to Bellingham one time, not having my plane registration, I bought out my partner, it was sitting on my desk in my office. So have your documents ready.
Yes.
It was a $10,000 fine.
Oh,
They
no.
waived it, they give you a warning, right?
It took 5 hours in detention before they brought in the guy, and they took my plane apart, just totally took it apart. And then yeah, you're free to go and bring it in by Monday morning. Okay, but anyway, it was a horror. I really thought I was going to jail.
Yeah, no, and I've experienced that too, where that's why I said the rental form. you know, somebody took an airplane down that they had ownership of, but of course, it was in a club name, and they didn't have any, they didn't show that they were part of that club, and they just, it was like, whose airplane is this? Well, it's our club. Well, who are you? I'm a member of a club. How do I know? How do I know you're not just stealing this airplane? So it was very, but if you got all the documents, you give it to them, it's fine. Next slide. So let's just talk about airspace. So you've got, you're pretty lucky here. You've got your Class G airspace, which is all down low, and who the hell knows why we still have that? I guess maybe for here you can fly around without a radio or whatever. But then your E airspace starts at what, 1,200 feet?
7 or 12, usually.
Yeah, and then that provides IFR and VFR
That's
control.
ATO.
Yeah. So for us, we have it slightly different. We have G. Our G airspace can go up to like flight level 270 in certain places in Canada. Well, Canada's a big place, and
It goes all the way to the North Pole, by the way, it includes the Arctic.
and does anybody know what we're doing up in the North Pole there? This is a little sub-story.
Are you guys moving it, the ones moving it every year?
That's the wrong North Pole.
So my son went to Afghanistan and got a little banged up. He got a trip he got to go to the North Pole, got to walk to the North Pole, the Meninic North Pole. And everywhere they went, the locals would say, Russians were here like 2 weeks ago. They came up through the ice in full uniform, walked into town. And they're doing it just so that they can say, if there's ever any minerals or any dispute, yeah, we've been patrolling this area, patrolling it for years. And the Danish are constantly putting a flag on some island, and we go and wait till they go, and then we go put our flag on that island. So there's some disputed territories way up high north, and of course everybody wants to own it for the minerals. So we don't have an army base, an air force base, or anything. Cold Lake is probably our north, and that's so we got this whole chunk of the world which we don't have any military presence on purpose. And what we have is we have the Rangers, and the Rangers are what are they? They're not Eskimos anymore. They're called
First Nations.
no, not First Nations.
Inuit.
That's right.
Inuit,
Sorry,
yeah.
I actually took a course on what to say and what not to say. And I know I'm no longer Eskimos. Inuit. That's right. So they give them these old rifles, and they're dressed in red, and they go around and they investigate, so that when they say the Russians were here, they drive out on their snowmobiles, and 2 days later they get there and they're defending the sovereignty of Canada. They're always late, luckily, so there's never things. But we make sure that they all have a government ID card that has Canada on it, and they're all their stores are funded by us giving them money for the stores. They're all on social assistance and so on, so that we can lay claim. But one of the things up there is that we got airspace that we're controlling, but it's for international flights. So 270, we don't need
That's the floor of
the control, and it goes up to, of course, 60,000. So, and then it steps down, and then what we call southern domestic airspace, which is basically from the Arctic Circle down, is what you're dealing with. And if you get any higher up than the Arctic Circle, then we can talk. But we actually have some G airspace that goes up to 18,000 feet. Good luck finding it. And I'm going to show you the next map where just don't count on it being there. But what happens, no, you can just keep that one up there, Leslie. So what happens is that we got a lot of E airspace, obviously. And E airspace is just simply 3 miles visibility. IFR traffic's provided a service. VFR also uses it. That's why there's the 3 miles. Then we have C, which is, well, we have D, but it's virtually gone. If you can find D, it's like rock and horse manure. It's long since not there anymore. And the reason is because technically you only had to establish radio communications, and then you can fly into it. So like we had the Langley Airport was D, and you could just tell the controller, hi, you there? Yep, well, I'm landing. Well, you don't have a clearance. Don't need one. I just need to establish two-way communications, which I have, so have a great day. That wouldn't last very long, so they're now Class C, so all these places have gone to Class C. So Class C airspace is controlled airspace, and that's what's around our control zones like Abbotsford and Boundary Bay, Langley now, and Pitt Meadows, and it's also our terminal airspace that's like an upside down wedding cake all around Vancouver.
It's
And
kind
it's
of
all-
interesting though, because Comox is Class D, but they're military.
Yeah.
So they don't have to have the Class C.
So the Class C, so all that Class C, and you need a clearance to go into it. Now, where it's different in Canada and in the United States, this is the big difference, is, well, firstly, your terminal airspace is Class Bravo, right? Around,
Yeah,
Big and busy.
CTAC. Ours is Class C. So the difference between a control zone and a terminal area, they're both Class C for us. They're both controlled. What happens is that when your Class Bravo airspace, it tops out at 10,000 above sea level. So you can go over Los Angeles at 15,000 feet and just look down and see all the little airplanes going in that. We don't have that. If we have controlled airspace, and Class E counts as controlled airspace, on top of that, we put a Class B on it. So we have Class B. Our Bravo airspace starts at 12,500, or MEA, which is ever, minimum en route altitude, which is ever higher, because we have some really high terrain.
Yeah,
But for all intents and purposes, 12,500. And it goes to 18,000 feet, and then Class A starts at 18,000 feet, where you can only be IFR.
Like the US.
Like the US, all the way up to 60,000 feet, then it becomes Class Echo again. Problem there is you can't overfly Vancouver. Like you can overfly Seattle. You can't go up and over it. So we have this extra Bravo airspace, which is on top of our C airspace, which for all intents and purposes is your B, that blocks you. So
So
you,
12.5 and on up is nationwide in Canada then?
well, I'm going to give you another slide here. As far as you're concerned, it is, because here's the next slide. Oops, we'll go back. This is the low-level chart, which is not very good there, but you can see a white and a green, basically, right? Can you a little bit?
I could see it on my computer, but for some reason it didn't show up there.
Well, you can see the little green bit
Oh,
here.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's uncontrolled airspace,
Up to,
18,000 feet.
okay,
So, in theory, there's no Class B airspace there.
okay.
So
Okay.
in this little bit
Wow.
here, you could fly to 18,000 feet VFR. Now, I'll go to the next slide.
Without
And it's
talking-
on the terminal, it's on our sectional charts. Good luck finding it. And good luck being stuck to this little chunk of space that's not there.
Yeah.
So as far as you're concerned, unless you can find that Class G airspace that goes to 18,000 feet, 12.5 is got,
Just assume 12.5 and above.
yeah, it probably.
Anything controlled, which includes airways. So that's Echo. Anything above a controlled airspace is Bravo. The only time it's Gulf is if it's actually above a Gulf airspace.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you get real high north, then they don't provide air traffic control services, and it's really weird because I used to fly up there, and they'll just say, radar service terminated, squawk, whatever you want to do. Good luck there, buddy, and and then you just kind of fly along and you report position reports, and other people report them, and you hope to hell that everybody's at the right cruising altitude and that TCAS works, and there is no IFR service, like there's zero, none. But it's pretty high north, and but anything that's down low, that you're going to be experiencing, just count on Class B airspace about 12,500. So you can't fly over the Vancouver airport, you can't fly over Abbotsford airport, you can't fly over any of these places by just going up to 12.5 or 14 or so on. You're going to end up in Class B.
So you can't, even if you're talking to somebody.
Now you can.
It's feasible if you get authorization to do so.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, yes, you can. You can get what they call controlled VFR from 12,000 feet to 18,000
With the
feet.
flight plan, with the clearance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talk to
Just
them.
want to
Yeah,
clarify that. So-
Yeah, you can, but none of this just show up type stuff like you
Okay.
can in the United States. Okay, go back to the next one, which was F. We have F airspace up in
You
Canada.
may have wondered why you guys skipped F, we got it.
We figured if you're not gonna use it, we're gonna use it. E, F, G. Okay, so F airspace really has two connotations. One is restricted airspace, which is what we got over here. It's, let's see, it is restricted 107, and it's by no town.
So
Now,
R
they-
there means restricted, yeah.
So they will have danger zones, which are also restricted, but they are off the coast. There are coastal defense areas, right? But they're by no town also.
Right.
But if you see an R, now the problem here is that when you fly up like around Comox and so on, they can be active. And if you fly through one of those things, then you are going through restricted airspace. They're not always active, but they can be active. If they were always active, then there would be Class B or Class C airspace, obviously, right? The next one is A's, and they're alert. And this one's training, and aerobatics and training, and you can have parajumping, you can have all this stuff. You can fly through them, but you just have to be vigilant. And in the back of the VTA charts now, they're actually put frequencies for climbing or flying through Class F airspace. Once again, you're not required to talk, but it's a good idea because everybody's yapping away at each other, telling their positions in Class F airspace. So the only thing that you need to know is that there's Class F airspace, which is restricted, which you can't go through if it's no time closed. Class CYAs, which are alert areas, which are just advisory that there's something going on, like a parajumping or hang gliding or some sort of aerobatic training. There is other zones. We have temporary flight restrictions too. The biggest ones that we have are forest fighting areas.
Yeah.
And there's a problem with them, finding them on the map, and I will help you with that here shortly. So next slide. Next one. So anyway, here is all our airspace. So these are corridors that you have to fly. So when you go this direction, you're above, north of Langley, and this one.
VFR.
Yeah, VFR. And here's the zones and everything. So what I've learned to do is, I just given up trying to remember this stuff. Like, I mean, it's like, holy tamale.
Yeah.
I'm using ForeFlight now. I plan my trips out, and I purposely plan them to an entry point. So like, for instance, when I go down to Seattle, there's two arrivals from the north. There's the Green Lake and there's the Bellevue arrival into SeaTac. I purposely go to the east to make sure that I go over Bellevue, because I know I'm going to get the Bellevue arrival, and then I plot it into my ForeFlight, all the little waypoints, like, and you know, you got to go over this bridge. Okay, I'll find the bridge. Even if I got to go to Google Map, I'll find the bridge. I'll make it, and I'll start plotting it in.
Although ForeFlight is now putting VFR waypoints in ForeFlight, which is really helpful.
Yes, it is. But if you looked at like coming out of Seattle, they'll talk about the Mount Baker Tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Really, guys? They'll talk about the IKEA store. Really, guys?
We talk about the auto mall and the courthouse.
I know, we do the same thing in Canada. Report the auto mall, the courthouse. What would the courthouse be? That would be where, you know, they say Surrey in Canada has kind of had a bad reputation for crime and stuff. You know what they call a man from Surrey in a tie? The defendant. So, so they've got this
That's
place.
where all those defendants are streaming.
Yeah,
in.
that's
the
where they
courthouse.
all are in ties below you. If you can see into the building, that's called the courthouse, and you gotta report it. It is on the VTA chart. So
There it is, right there.
yes.
Courthouse, right there, it shows it, right at that end.
So what I do is I make a point there, and then when I go onto ForeFlight, I don't operate with this as much as I take it off and have the aerial view. But now it's got all the points. So what I'm doing now is that if I go into Abbotsford, I make sure that I'm gonna go to one of their arrival routings on purpose now. And then I look in the book and I just see, and I plot myself in so that when I'm actually flying, that I just follow my little magenta line that I spent the night. And same with departure. If they give me something like they got a new one. It's something like, this has been around for 18 months. We gotta change the name of it, right? All those guys that have got used to it. So we used to have like the greenhouse arrival into Abbotsford. No, that wasn't good enough. Now we got the 3 roads arrival, which starts at 3 roads, then goes to the greenhouse, then goes here, and then goes here. But I just plot them in all now, and I just look at the altitude restrictions, and I think that's the only way at this complex airspace. The days of you arriving into Abbotsford and them saying, you're clear the Baker 1 arrival, and going, Baker 1 arrival. Hang on a second, some of that's going to be on the back of this chart, some of it's in here. Those days are gone. So you're going to have to pre-arrange your trips. Now once you pre-arrange them, they're super easy, because the Baker arrival is just going to be a series of it's going to have an altitude restriction on it, and then super simple. But I would say, you know, I used to fly all across Canada, all throughout the United States, and the clearance used to be the same. Clear downwind, clear base, clear final. I could figure that out.
Come on, really?
Somebody decided they wanted a departure arrival route. Now we got Langley. Langley is like 2,000 feet. It's got crop dusters there, it's got tail wheels. We need the Poppy departure. Really? What do you need? Like, they just can't depart. No, they gotta do a Poppy departure. And they've gotta do a 2:30-second arrival. Really? Well, where do they end up? On left base, why? You know, like, it seems to be like the flavor of the day. So, I've talked to Nav Canada about this, and all I've realized is I'm getting nowhere fast. So, I guess I'm gonna just learn to get my ForeFlight out, do a little research for both the arrival and departure. So I'm not too concerned anymore about going in, and I'm gonna take that, if you wanna go to that chicken thing.
And the other thing, all those VFR points are on this VTA. It gives the lat long, and it stars the ones that are used in Vancouver published arrivals and departures. So if you do need to look them up and you say, oh, where is that? What do they mean? You can actually look and put that into your GPS if it's not
Oh,
there.
yeah, so you can use that to plot.
Yes, this is really good. I used to use these and highlight the ones that I always used and put them in, but I did notice, and I think you and I noticed, that now ForeFlight is putting the VFR waypoints in ForeFlight as well, which is very helpful.
Yes.
I won't guarantee they're all there.
So what I think is gonna happen, and because ForeFlight's owned by Boeing, is you're gonna see VFR arrival charts and departure charts, just like the IFR ones, which are simplistic. Instead of this, mix every single chart known to man on one plate, put it in 6 font, and send it to somebody that's bouncing up and down on an airplane. So I think those days, those are gone.
You wanted me to go here or what?
Yeah, it just shows that all the different arrivals and everything,
Yeah.
they're not difficult if you figure them out one by one. When you look at all of them, you think, oh my God. Now, the other thing that you have is being N-raised. Just like when we're C-registered down here, we go, oh, we're not familiar. And then you just get treated like gold, because I can tell you up at Boundary Bay, you know, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to, in the future, N-registered, oh, how can I help you? Have you been here before? And unless you've been there like every single day for the last 3 years, the answer is, oh no. Oh no, you know, would you like progressive taxi? Oh, could you? Can I close your flight plan? Oh, you're so sweet. Use it while you can, right? Like, so many people they go down, are you familiar with customs? Yes. Why did you say that, right? Why didn't you just say no? And then we get a friend for life until we shut the engine down. So don't be, I talked to Nav Canada, I says, this stuff is getting way too complicated. And they says, well then, I just tell them that they're unfamiliar, because it was never meant for visiting itinerary pilots. It's always meant for guys going in and out.
All
So
the time.
use that, except for in terminal space in Vancouver.
Yeah, I was just at the Boundary Bay Control Tower yesterday with some of my ground school students, and that's exactly what they said. If you don't know, just say you're unfamiliar, they will help you and tell you everything to do. So you do not have to know all the stuff.
The only thing I'll say in terminal, write it down first, because the terminal controllers, they will put on the ATIS, so the locals. Due to staffing shortages, VFR aircraft may not be accommodated into terminal airspace. The other reading is, we don't like the way you sound, we're not gonna let you in. And it has nothing to do with really workload, it has everything to do with, I had to call you 3 times to give you traffic, I had to move Air Canada, you're done, right? So when the guy goes to the lunchroom, they said, why did you let that guy in? He was nothing but problems the whole time he was in there. So what I have our people do is just write it out. Same as when we go to Los Angeles or into Seattle, to get rid of the ahs, because when they're thinking, they're awing, right? You know, Seattle Center, you don't even know who you are yet. Like, we're already awing on our own call sign. Like, usually we can get 3 of them before we start to awe. And I'm here, and then a lot of them, they start to figure out where they are once they click the mic. Like, we are really, you're going to think about where you are, and then their altitude, and then their request. But if they just rattle it off, it sort of sounds sort of like it's, you know, like, are you Chuck Yeager's son, or what's the story here, right? And I've never been turned down into Class Bravo airspace or into terminal airspace if the person reads it. I have had people say, sorry, we're too busy today, lie. If it becomes problematic with the way that they call it. And the second thing is, if you are in Class Bravo airspace and or the terminal, this is not the time to carry on a conversation with your buddy. You got to listen to the radio. Luckily for us, and it's good for you, is they always call us Canadian. Canadian Tango India Romeo. The only Canadian, and they'll say November, right? Which is like the only November airplane. For us, it's different because, you know, it's Foxtrot Uniform Tango and Tango Uniform Foxtrot, like who you know, it's the call signs can become very familiar.
Am I right? Sorry, am I right in saying that the US pilot in Canada has to use the word November?
They
Yes,
don't,
yes.
They do? Or they
but
don't?
you can. How it works in Canada is just like the United States. You use your full, you type in your full, right? And then you repeat what they give back to you.
So do you not have to use November even on your
No.
initial call?
No,
See,
no.
they don't have to do it on the initial call.
Yeah. So, but I would
In
use
Canada,
it.
use it in the initial call.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. And they will sometimes use November just so that you'll wake up because you're the only November
Well,
one.
and to wake up the other pilots, because remember, the Canadian pilots are not used to that many numbers coming that aren't a heading or a setting of some sort. When they hear a bunch of numbers, it's like, what are numbers? We've used letters. So I think if you say the November followed by it, it clarifies it for us, for Canadian pilots. The
But
same
what-
way we say Canadian Foxtrot Yankee Zulu Whiskey.
Yeah. And so what will happen though, and technically if they drop, you can drop to what they drop. But you'll see that they'll often use the term November, and that's just to help you. Now, all controlled airspace and everything, so we figured out that we're going to have to do our homework, we're going to have to go to the entry points, we're going to have to draw them in and everything, and you'll have no problems, and then we're going to plead that we've never been here before, even though we come here every week, and you're not going to have any problems. And the controllers are super, super, super with contingent or transferable people or November airplanes. Like, I just can't believe how nice they are, comparatively how to us, you know, like. So anyway, now that deals
They're
with,
nice to me, I don't know what it's from. They're really nice to me.
and they're nice to girls. I've also noticed that.
I also will say, when I fly Angel flights up there, they give us, I don't know if you guys do it, but we have a call sign for Angel Flight.
Yeah.
So I'll say Angel Flight 021. They are always nice to me. And they, like I fly into YVR, they do not let small planes go into YVR. I get like the golden treatment going in.
So,
But
so here-
Jim wouldn't be able to.
yeah, no, there's- in the future. So anyway, all of the little nasty airports, which you gotta take in, are all lined up in a big row in the Fraser Valley. So we got Victoria, we got Boundary Bay, we got Vancouver, we've got Pitt Meadows, we got Langley, we got Abbotsford. No, Chilliwack is not a controlled airport.
Oh, that's true.
It's not controlled.
Which one? Then I-
Yeah. So the only other towers we have is Kelowna and Prince George. If you can think of another one, let me know. So that's it. All the towers are sitting right there. Once we get out of the lower mainland, besides Prince George and Kelowna, we're hot and dusty for all this squiggly line stuff and everything now.
So
which-
get through there and go visit other places in Canada.
So now, how do we get into all these airports? So, next slide. So anyway, we're talking about the arrival procedure. So like for instance, today, we got the 3-road arrival. To fly to the greenhouse, then follow the power lines, westbound turn final over there. And then it's at the very top, it says, here, it says 1700 to on final. I can remember 1700 on final to runway 19, and I can track on my little 4-flight the way in. I'm golden as long as I show up at 3 roads. If I show up somewhere at Claiborne and they go, you're clear to the Claiborne ride, I go, didn't get a chance to study that last night, you know. So yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm through. Okay, so now we get through here.
Hey, real quick though, just a side note, maybe you were gonna talk about this, the Class Delta airspace that's about a mile north of here, or Abbotsford there, where you've got those 2
Yeah.
different porches. That's ground to 2,500, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then, if anybody bops into that from here without talking to Abbotsford, are they gonna pursue that?
Yes, they are, because
Yeah.
what it is, remember we said Class Bravo Delta airspace is as good as Charlie? You're supposed to establish contact in there, and that's to protect the iOS going into Abbotsford.
And the
Okay, so
only
it's for
reason,
the, I'm sorry.
the only reason it's Delta is because it's not in Canada.
That's right.
Yeah.
That- this
4
is-
miles
this
in
is
the
the
US,
US
it's
border
5
right
miles
here.
in Canada, it's
And
Delta
so
in the
this is
US,
all
it's
Charlie.
Charlie in Canada.
You need clearance. This is Delta. Technically, this is in the US, so therefore they've made it Delta.
And it extends all the way up to White Rock to protect the iOS.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's for IFR,
It's
it's
all
really for
about the
IFR,
approaches.
not for the.
Well, but you
VFR.
have to, go ahead.
The Class Delta is around the Abbotsford Airport south of the border, and that's because it's in US airspace and confirms with US rules. Beyond the guide, all the way out to White Rock, above 1,500 feet, it's Class Charlie airspace, all the way out.
Because it's those approaches. And you're right, it's that ILS 07 going in.
Yeah, so then that, you can't cross the border, or just fly willy-nilly up by the border, west of the guide all the way out to White Rock, because you come into Class Charlie airspace once you're above 1,300
He may not
feet.
know it, the
Yeah,
guide.
and who's
is,
controlling that?
The guide Meridian.
It's
is
controlled by Abbotsford Tower.
It's still Abbotsford, okay.
Yeah, Abbotsford Tower controls, that's part of their control
They
zone
control all of
out
this
there.
space.
To protect their approach. So if you were coming, say, from the north or from the south,
here we are.
going to Pitt Meadows and crossing that airspace, that actually belongs to Abbotsford. They may use Victoria Terminal, which is like Victoria Approach Control, to control you through that airspace.
Okay, yeah, it used to be talked to Victoria Terminal, but I had never talked to Abbotsford.
But just look at some of the arrival routings that you could use. You could use the Baker arrival. You see the Baker arrival there?
You stayed south of the.
So it's just fly, run,
US control.
well, that's the,
Here's Baker arrival on the chart.
The Baker-
Baker arrival.
yeah, fly directly to Rocky, which is a rock quarry. And then join the right base. So it's fairly simple. Just go to Baker or go to Birch Point. But you see, Lynden is a reporting point. It's not an arrival routing. You see the difference?
But they're
It's
not
these-
gonna worry about it.
These
Sorry?
black diamonds.
They're not gonna worry about it coming out of here. if you're leaving Lynden going to Abbotsford, we talk to Abbotsford Tower on the ground here. We call them, tell them what we're going to do before we depart. If you are coming from Bellingham and going to Abbotsford, I would recommend calling prior to getting to Lynden on 120.1 or 119.4, the 120.1 being the outer tower, so that you're giving them some prior warning that you're getting here, or getting towards that airspace. The other is, if you're take off out of Bellingham and tell them you want to talk to Victoria Terminal, get on a Victoria Terminal and let them assign the frequencies to you in the routing, because they'll give you, basically give you a direct routing.
Now, the only thing is on Abbotsford, 121.0 is by ATIS only.
Yeah.
It's 19.4 unless ATIS.
Here it is.
Boundary Bay is the other way around, it's 127.6 regardless of the ATIS. But the big thing here is that you can call Lynden out of here. If I was to go into Boundary Bay and not report at a reporting point on a consistent basis, they would call and say, you need to start going to the reporting place. So you do get special privileges by being transient.
But you guys all know where the Whatcom VOR is too. I mean, that's actually a really simple way to get in there. That can help you set you up there.
But let's go to the next chart then, please. Okay, so in Canada, the circuit entry procedure. It used to be simple, then they got a little more complicated, and now they're going to simplify it here. But basically,
That's what we call traffic patterns, by the way. We call them circuits.
what happened is that there used to be towers at Nanaimo, Kamloops, and everybody, and somebody said, we can save a lot of money by not having air traffic controllers there. We'll have flight service station specialists there. And they'll advise people but not clear them. So they're actually in old control towers advising you. And what they did is they said, we'll make them mandatory frequencies. So people have to have radios, they have to talk to these people, and we'll just tell them that there's nobody on final and they can just report and they can join straight in on final, or they can join in on base, or they can do whatever they want. But we won't have controllers there, okay?
So they're
So-
providing an airport advisory.
But this is really where it gets tricky though. If you're calling radio, you can, on a mandatory frequency, and you can only have radio on a mandatory frequency.
Which is the flight service station, pretty much.
You can join in on final, you can join in overhead, on a base, you can join on 45 onto down. You can treat it like a tower where they have a substitute teacher for the day, and there isn't really a controller there, but for all intents and purposes, you can just tell the guy. So if you're going into Kamloops and he says winds are 090 at 10, you can go, Roger, we'll report, we'll join straight in on runway 09. And fine, not a problem. No problems at all. Then, and that was so simple. If you weren't at a place where there was somebody that could give you that, then they call it traffic. And you'd have to announce your presence to traffic. Traffic, we're doing this. Then you could only join on the downwind for the runway. You could only join straight in at circuit altitude, or cross over midfield at circuit altitude. You could not descend on the downwind. You couldn't do like you do in the United States, go and descend on this side and come in on the 45. You have to descend on the inactive side and join over, okay? So if you, and I'm going to get into more of this a little bit later because there's always exceptions to the rule, right? So if you're talking to traffic, you have to join on downwind. How we join on downwind we'll get to. If you're talking to radio, you can just treat it like you are the air traffic controller for the day. Except for Nanaimo,
And
who's
Nanaimo's just changed, by the way. Have you been in there recently?
well, Nanaimo's going to go become a tower.
Yeah, they just came with a new advisory. I flew in there not too long ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they've now added another controller, and so I can see.
Yeah, so Nanaimo's going to go back to a tower.
Okay.
They've got ground controllers now. They
Right.
have things that they know they have to go to a tower.
Yeah.
But and the only reason I say is Nanaimo is that of all, like if you go into Tofino, Now, the Tofino is a radio, but the radio is not on the field. It's not Tofino radio. It could,
It's Port Hardy.
it is Port Hardy. But as long as you're talking to some guy and you're calling him radio, you can join straight in on final, you can do whatever. And so you'd call up Port Hardy, it's such and such over the Broken Islands, inbound to Tofino, so on and so forth. Roger, no reporter, traffic winds or such and such will report here, fine, great, great. Nanaimo, it's you join here, you do this, you do that. You think, hey, just a second here. You're not supposed to be a controller, but they are.
Oh,
So that's why they're gonna change it back to control tower. It's just that they have to tell the traffic what to do, because otherwise they'll just all interfere.
There's too much traffic through there over the Gulf Islands.
Yeah, now, just go ahead.
So functionally, if there's a mandatory frequency listed on the chart, then
So be careful
Oh,
with
no,
the-
let me get
yes.
to this.
how do you know when you're green and when you're blue then?
Okay, I'll get there, because here's where the problem occurred. Life was grand. We had mandatory frequencies, substitute teachers, and we had ATFs, and we had to do this full procedure. Then somebody said, you know something? If there was an IFR approach at an uncontrolled airport, then we would have to have a radio for the VFR traffic. We'll make them mandatory frequencies. So they put mandatory frequencies in places like Chilliwack
They don't have a flight service.
that don't have, and then everybody went, mandatory frequency, I can join straight in on final, and that's where it became difficult. So let me show you where you can find the difference. Next slide. If you look at the communication section and you see the word traffic, then you do the full procedure.
So this is an MF with, this is Chilliwack is a good example, right? It is an MF, but it's not a flight service station. So that's traffic.
So the MF protects IFR traffic. You have to have a radio, because before you could go in there with no radio, right? So IFR could come out and there'd be some guy in an old airplane. So if it says traffic, you got that full procedure. Next slide.
And notice on this one, it's an MF. You must have a radio. This is an ATF. You could have no traffic there. So be aware that if it says ATF, they are not required, they're literally saying mandatory means mandatory, not that it means a flight service station. So the thing that tells you if it's a flight service station is if it says traffic or radio.
So we'll go to the next one here. So this is radios. So you see Kamloops has a radio, and you're talking to a radio. So this is where you don't have to do the full procedure. Now you look over here, which is high level Alberta, it says mandatory frequent radio, other times traffic. So when the radio stops operating, it goes back to the full join on the downwind.
So limited hours, yeah. And then you have to look you have to look to see what the hours are up here.
So both the examples on this page are blue,
Yes,
and then both the examples on the previous page would be green.
Right?
that's correct.
If it's RDO, but not if it goes to the traffic. See right there where it says
Right.
other times traffic? That turns it into the green.
But still mandatory frequency for self-announcing. So,
Well, the mandatory frequency, you have to have the radio, and I'll talk about the mandatory calls. But let's just go to this little device, because I want to go over all. I flew in.
He wanted a whiteboard. I said, I'll give you a whiteboard. I'm gonna give him this and let him just write on my iPad. Let's see if I can get this to work.
So I flew in Europe, and what I learned is the British have 6 rules for everything.
Careful.
The French have 1 rule for everything and 6 exceptions. So
I think that will be right.
we had 2 rules, now we gotta do the 6 exceptions, right? So, can you see this airport here?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the runway. And let's say it's Chilliwack. So it has one circuit pattern that runs this way, and the other circuit pattern runs the opposite direction. So it has one active side, one inactive side at all times. So how you can join this runway, so this would be 07, this is 2.5. You could, and its circuit altitude, we'll say, is 1,100 feet. Most people cross over at 1,100 feet. They announce that they're crossing over midfield and just look at the windsock and they make their decision, if they don't already know it, as they cross over, and they either join a downwind right hand for 0.7 or downwind left hand for 2.5. You report on the downwind. You don't have to report on the base like you do here. And you report on the final and you report clear. Okay? You cannot descend here. You can't come down on that side. Now, if you, so you're going to have to arrange your flight to come in from the north if you want to do that. The other thing you could do is you could cross over at 1,600 feet and descend down on the inactive side and cross back over, but you have to be 1,100 feet before you hit the middle. The whole premise here goes back to a series of accidents where low wings descended on high wings and they didn't see each other. So what the whole premise is that you have to be able to see out your window the downwind. You can't be descending on the downwind, you can't be declining on the downwind. Now, once the circuit pattern has been established, it is okay that you could join straight in. Okay, but you would have to know which pattern is active, right? Or on this side. So if there's already airplanes in there, you can go here or here, but those are the only two ways that you can join. You can join on an established downwind straight in, or cross over at circuit altitude and turn from the inside. The only two ways to join. If it runs on one side. Any questions on that? Go ahead.
So established traffic pattern there, so you've got aircraft in the circuit
You
already?
hear them saying they're on a runway.
Okay, so if you call Unicom and they say it's, east of, 090, 10 knots or something like that, you couldn't, could you join the downwind for that?
Here's the issue, and so this is being discovered, this is being handled by Transport Canada right now, and they expect a decision in the next month or two on what is a traffic advisory.
Yeah, we were just discussing this. I said, wait a second, if there's somebody there in a plane, isn't that a traffic advisory?
So
That's- yeah.
the issue is that, say it's another airplane, he could be long since gone. Well, some guy told me 10 minutes ago, so they're gonna make a decision on what is a traffic advisory. In the meantime, Transport has told me to say it has to be like a flight service station that advises issue, okay? But if there's already a established traffic pattern because you can hear it, you can join. What you can't do is join straight in on final, right? Because say that you talked to your buddy and said the winds are 090 at 10, okay, I'll just join straight in on 07. You can't do that. But you can join straight in on runway 25 if you think if you know that that's the active pattern because there's people in it, or on the other way. Problem is if you get it wrong, you got traffic going in both directions, and the other issue is on calm wind days, what is the traffic pattern, right? And that's why they like somebody like radio to establish the traffic pattern. But if you know what it is, you can join straight in here or here. What you can't do is you can't do like in the United States where you come here and you descend and you join on the 45. That's not allowed. Okay, so it's either this way or that way.
If it's traffic.
Yes.
Is there a designated calm wind runway in the literature?
I know they have them down here. They don't.
No.
They don't normally put them in. There may be some. Now, how do
We
I
get to know
how do I
preferred
get rid
ones
of all
based on local knowledge. But
How do I
I've
get
never
rid of
seen
all
it.
this?
Say again? Oh, hit clear, use the tip,
This here?
clear, clear.
Clear. Okay.
go back to your little drawing. Yeah, there you go, it should be good.
Okay, now let's take Hope. Hope has a pattern this way, and also has a pattern, so it has two active sides. This is where it becomes a little more
Two
complicated.
possible.
Yeah. So they're also runway 07 and 25. And they're both left hand. So this one's going like this, right? And this one's going like this. So, if you know it's runway 07, once again, you can join straight in. If you know it's runway 25, you can join straight in.
Careful when you say straight in.
To the
Trust
downwind.
That means.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
straight into
Yeah.
the
To
downwind.
the
That's a really good point. Straight to the downwind.
Straight into the downwind at the altitude.
Yeah.
So whatever the altitude is there, I think it's, can you just.
At Hope, I think, it's,
Doesn't matter.
Well, I just want to get it right so that you,
yeah, that's
so you don't, so yeah. These guys said it was 1,800 feet, that's what I've been doing.
yeah, it's, elevation's 1128, so 1,000 above that.
No, it can't be 1128.
I'm sorry, 128. I added 1,000 for you.
So it's 128.
Hope is
So we'll say it's
128.
1100, okay.
Yeah.
So you can come in at 1100 here. Now, if you don't know which direction it is, you're to come over at 1,600 feet, figure out what direction it is, and then go to the inactive side, say it's this side, and descend, and then come back over. If this was the active side, then you would have to come back over here and descend on the inactive side and join over, okay? So you're always descending on the inactive side so that if you're not descending onto
And
circuit.
the crossover has to be at least 500 feet above the circuit altitude.
However, I'll teach you a shortcut here. What people do, and it's fine, and just so you know, once they clarify a little bit more, they're changing the flight test standards in Canada that you have to be able to brief the two different types, the radio and the traffic pattern, to get your license in Canada. If you don't pass that, you don't pass the ground. So,
He means a literal radio, not flight service station, right? Or you have to brief approaching with radio active.
yeah, so exercise 17, which is the circuit, is going to be now a ground and air exercise, and it's going to be, it says if you are departing from an airport that's controlled airport, you must describe the two uncontrolled airport procedures.
Okay.
And that's in the new pages. So left hand on this side and left hand on this side. So what a lot of people do is there's an active and an inactive side, they just don't know. They join here, like that, 1100.
Does that help? If I do that? Helps me because I'm doing something.
And they go down, and if they see that this is the active side, then they've joined the downwind, they're fine. They call downwind, and they call final. If they find out that it's not the active side, then they cross over
That circuit height.
at circuit height, and they join the active side.
Yeah.
So they don't have to do a
Cross.
crossover. So if you're coming into Hope, you just come in here, and if you think it's 2.5, away you go. If you look at the windsock, you think, I got it wrong, or somebody else is in the circuit, you just cross over, because that's the way you can cross over. So that's acceptable. So you can either go over, figure out the side and go down and across, here and across, or you can just join in on one direction. So, just for review, if both of the circuit patterns are here, like at Powell River or at Chilliwack, most people just arrange their flight to come in like this. if you're real sure which direction it is, because there's people in there, or it's the windiest day known to man, you can join in like this. This is not, there's nothing wrong, we gotta be sure. If not, you come across. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Then, if it's on both sides, you have to either cross over, well above, find the inactive side and spiral down, and then recross over, or, which would probably just be just as well, if you got two, you can just join in on one of them, because if that's the active side, then you don't care, because if this is the active side, where all the airplanes are, then you're on the inactive side. And if it is the active side, then you join correctly. And if it's not, then you go over and you join the active side from the inside, which is good. So you've got your two entry procedures. Now, just a little bit of a variance here. You must remember the Pacific Western crash in Cranbrook, do you? Okay. So we got a
Snowplow?
yeah, so let's just go over that, because out of that came all the uncontrolled airport procedures that are known now. So basically there was Calgary, there was Cranbrook, and this was the IFR controller, and there was a flight service station here. And Pacific Western Airlines was flying in there on an instrument approach. And the controller here talked to the flight service station guy and gave an ETA. But that ETA involved them doing a full procedure turn. Pacific Western didn't do the full procedure turn. They rolled up on the runway. Now, at that time, flight service was split between airplanes and ground equipment. So when they got the ETA from Calgary, he gave it to the ground equipment. Now, as you all know, when you're coming out of the clouds and you're kind of disoriented, it's great to see that black stripe that the sweeper or the snowplow has left on the runway. So they usually try to keep the airplane, the snowplow on the runway to the very end, and then say, you've got 3 minutes to get off. Now remember, they don't move that fast, snowplows or stuff, that could be a mile and a half, so that, it's gonna take them like 3 minutes to get off. Back then, and the industry was regulated, so this whole community would only have like jet service once a day. They didn't have this deregulation where they had like all these Beech 1900s going back and forth every day. So if that airplane didn't get in, it didn't get in that day. And I remember being up in Dawson Creek, and the biggest event of the day was Pacific Western landing, and everybody that had to go somewhere would go, and people would come home. If they didn't get in, it was a big deal, right? So there, he's out sweeping the runway off of this ETA. Well, these guys show up, and they start to land, and they notice that there's a snowplow on the runway. So they go around, and one of the reversers, because at that time they had the clamshell reversers, stays deployed, and they go up and they go around, and I think they killed about 83 people or stuff. Just kind of showed the load factors back then. So as a result of that, the pilot now has to give a 5-minute ETA. Not 5 miles, 5 minutes. Why not miles? Because the ETA is what the pilot thinks he's going to arrive at the airport, given the speed of his airplane, how he's going to do his approach, and everything. These two frequencies have to be on the same. So now the ground equipment can hear the pilot, and no longer is the flight service station or ATC going to give an ETA for the pilot. That's where that 5 minutes came from, okay? And I know here it's mileage. They came here so that the pilot would give the ETA. They still call miles. Trust me, I see it all the time. We're 5 miles off. But that's where it came. The other thing is they have to report final. Because back then you didn't have to report final if you're an IFR approach. So that's where the final came in. If there's no final approach fixed, it's 3 miles back or something like that. So IFR traffic can come straight in at an uncontrolled airport. VFR traffic has to do the loopy-loop thing, okay? So when you go up to Powell River, you're gonna see a Beech 1900 arrive straight in on an IFR approach. They're allowed to do that. You have to join the circuit pattern unless you're IFR. But they have to give their ETA and they have to report final.
Is that ETA 5 minimum or 5 on the nose?
Well, they say 5-minute ETA call, right? So obviously, it's to get the ground equipment off the runway, right? That was what it was for.
If you have a GPS, it helps. If you don't, you're guessing.
I mean, this may be out of date now, but this is why the rule came in. The rule came in is somebody said, hey, you know, the pilot should be the one giving the ETA, not ATC, and the ground vehicle should be listening to it by being on the same frequency, and that gives them enough time to get off the runway, or whoever to get off the runway. So, anyway, any questions on how to join the vast amount of uncontrolled airports? Go ahead.
Don't your airports don't have AWASs?
Yeah, they do now. Almost every airport now. And this is why it's becoming more and more out of date, and this is why Transport Canada is reviewing it right now, because even Chilliwack is publicizing its winds and its heights and stuff. You can go on a website. I would say within a few years, every single airport in Canada will be able to give you its winds and everything. So like this whole idea of having to fly over and look at a windsock, I mean, it's dead, right? It's just about gone. So that's why it's all under review right now, because these procedures go back to Nordal days where people used to be flying around airports with no radios and Class G airspace with 1 mile visibility on some farmer field or something like that, and then they would hit each other, and then they say, well, we got to put some rules in. So you're 100% right. The weather is going to be given established the pattern. So the book right now says if you can establish on a mandatory frequency, if you can establish an advisory, you can join straight in on final, not down final. Transport said that was never the intent. So now they have to determine what is an advisory. Is an advisory somebody on the ground? Is it your girlfriend that wants you home for dinner? It says it's kind of windy from the water. Is it AWAS? Is it Unicom? Don't know. But for now, just do what we did. If it says air traffic, if you're talking to traffic, do the full procedure. If you're talking to radio, do the abbreviated procedure. If you're talking to a tower, just spend 5 days figuring it out, or tell me you're not familiar. Do we have any other slides here?
Let's see, give me back.
But is there any questions on that? That is the toughest thing to fly in Canada.
If it's an airport if it's an airport with radio, is it the pilots in the circuit or the radio's responsibility to establish the pattern?
Wow, that is a really good question. Is that I land downwind all the time with a radio. So have I established the circuit pattern, yes or no?
They didn't tell you when you were flying in, hey.
It
So,
depends.
no, they don't.
I will say it
can't.
depends on where you are, because if you go to Nanaimo, they will tell you which runway is active. They used to not, they used to say preferred runway is da-da-da. And just recently, I don't know if you know why, but again, this may be going there, they now say the active runway is this, which means you really don't have a choice. Before when they said preferred, it was up to you.
Yes, so very good thing is what establishes is the circuit pattern, right? But at a mandatory frequency where you're talking to somebody, you can both come in from different angles, both come in from different directions. That's okay. It's only when there's nobody to be a referee and you're talking to traffic, then you guys are going to have to sort it out yourself, or you're going to have to conform to the circuit pattern.
This is, yeah.
Okay, just a few things on getting the weather here. So you go to this, it's got everything, you press NOTAM, and the NOTAM doesn't show up.
This was our famous AWWS, Aviation Weather website. You could just go out and type in Nav Canada AWWS, or even just AWWS, and you get this.
And it's good all except for NOTAM. Then it tells you that, just go over here, that you can't get NOTAMs anywhere from the NOTAM website.
They don't take you to where you can get it. They
So it
just
says,
take
you gotta go here. Now here's my bitch with this. Is that
Good,
you gotta
'cause
now
I was looking-
sign up to a subscription, not like a paid subscription, but you gotta have your login number and you gotta have this, you gotta have that. Then it'll give you the NOTAMs. Now, I'm just gonna give you a real quick little thing on, so that's how you get your NOTAMs.
Not really. I mean, and I can take you to the website. There is a sign in, but there is also a tab for weather and NOTAMs, which you don't have to be signed in.
Yeah.
for.
But I'm gonna just show you one last thing about NOTAMs in Canada that, because it does cause problems with the forest fires. And just let me know when I'm back again. Okay. So, I would really recommend that you fly the VFR flight things, because we built you a runway for the whole way. Otherwise, you're gonna have to deal with big trees or big rocks in the valleys. So, most people, if this is Hope, they go up the Fraser Canyon, or they go up this way, they go to Williams Lake and everything, they kind of follow all the roads. Okay, we get forest fires here, and there will be temporary closures here, and this will be closed. And you'll see this sunrise to sunset. It might have one altitude, and sunset to sunrise might have another altitude. They actually anticipate that the fire will, at night you don't have to be as hot. So be aware of that. So anyway, but this will be a restricted.
It's also fire suppression, right, too, the activities of
Yeah,
the stuff going.
but they'll change it, because trust me, when you'll see SS 8000, like what the hell, what code is this? What, sunrise, sunset, sunset, sunrise?
Is that the highest altitude that you have to avoid?
Yes.
Minimum
You can go above
altitude,
it.
yeah.
Yes, you can,
It's
you can
your-
overfly these things.
Yeah.
So, here's the problem. Kamloops issues the NOTAM. When you go from Hope to Williams Lake, it automatically gives you 10 nautical miles of track either side. Because it doesn't pick up Kamloops, it doesn't give you any of the airspace closures all the way along your route. Because it's not picking up the issuing station,
You're talking about Fort White, or what is not picking it up?
Nav Canada.
Oh.
So what you have to do is you have to extend to 30 miles. You gotta get ForeFlight, because ForeFlight will plot them on.
Yeah. That's nice.
Garment will put them on. You can expand to 30 miles. Or you gotta put that, that in as one of your airports, ZZVR. And does anybody know what ZZVR is? It is your friend and your enemy. It tells the computer to give you every NOTAM
Vancouver region.
in Vancouver region, right? So it will give you everything, and then you can go through it. Now, I don't print it. Don't print
It's when
it.
you call flight service,
The
tell them
flight-
where you're going,
Well, the problem with flight services is that
or if I see, yeah.
they're only as good as the guy that you contact. You're ultimately responsible. And I notice this a lot when I go to the States, and there'll be like a temporary restriction zone, and they won't tell me about it. And I'm thinking, anything else? No. Anything else? No. Okay. Well, ForeFlight's got it on you this today. So, but anyway, ForeFlight will give it to you. If you widen it out, you'll get it, or if you put CYDR. Whenever I do a flight test, I always see if they get CY ones, because if they put the certain airports in, it should give them the airport, and it should give them, the en route, because the airport is only gonna give you 25 nautical miles of the airport. So if there's a problem outside of the airport, that's more than, it's at 26 miles, you're not gonna pick it, so you're en route. And it also gives you the national NOTAMs. But I can tell if they got a CZVR in it, next to
Z
it.
is how you say Z in Canadian, by the way.
Then I know that they've picked them up. But if I don't see one single one of here, I know that there's a problem. And so what's in the national NOTAMs?
What was that question? What?
National NOTAMs. How do you know you're picking up national NOTAMs? Anybody?
40 pages?
No, they're actually, there's only 2 national NOTAMs out right now. They'll deal with things like COVID restrictions, closure of Ukraine airspace.
Yeah.
No Russian airplanes are allowed to land here, all that good stuff. So that'll be the national, you know, you got them. Then you'll get the CZVR, you know, if you've seen ZZVR, you know you're picking up the flight information ones. And if you do go up the Fraser Valley there, make sure that you widen it out a little bit to 30 nautical miles. It defaults to 10. And once again, I've talked to Nav Canada about it. I said, why would they default it to 10, right? And they just said, because back east, you go 30 miles, you're gonna pick up all sorts of stuff that you don't wanna see. So you guys on the West Coast can figure it out for yourself. Do we have any other slides? I think that's it.
That's it, yeah, there is that collaborative flight planning, give me the plug again. This, which is a newer,
We have a question back.
oh,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, you didn't bring up one of the more important things in that flight plan requirements. For VFR flights outside of 25
yeah,
miles.
okay, this is a really good point, thank you. And there's 2
Yeah.
things I forgot to tell you. One of them is you need a flight plan over 25 nautical miles, and you also need survival gear for the environment that you're flying in if you went more than 25 nautical miles. And this is a big thing, is that if you ever had an issue where you went down and somebody perished because you didn't have survival gear, it is now negligence not to have the equipment aboard the airplane. Because before, what it said, if you were going into sparsely populated area, you had to have survival gear. Now it says you have to have it for the environment of which you fly in.
Seasonal and climactic, so even if it's winter versus summer or the mountains, you know.
So you need something. Now survival gear, they don't define what it is, so it could
All of
be.
our guns?
Sorry?
We can bring all of our guns?
Yes.
Yeah, there's bears out there.
The other things that I was, so you need to have a flight plan. Normally you get a squat code if you're down south. You'll see out of Victoria and so on, they ask you to phone Kamloops to get the squat code. That will be in the flight supplement. In Canada, what you call the rounds, or the aprons, are not controlled. You taxi around them all you want. And except for hold short clearances, VFR traffic only needs to give their ident. So they can give, for readback. So if they say, you're clear of the boundary, sorry, the courthouse departure, the altimeters, this blah, 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 all I have to go is Tango Roman. That's fine. Try that in the States here, not so much. But anyway, so that is a big difference, and that's just come out in one of the publications that they've sent out in the last little while. I don't agree with it, but it's the way that they want it, except for hold short clearances for runway. So if they say, you clear to land runway 25, hold short of runway, or clear to runway 31, hold short of 25, you have to say hold short 25. You have to say it, but that's the only time otherwise you just have to give back your ident. Except for in terminal airspace, I would still read back, and then read back like you do in the United States with your call sign at the end, right? And I would still cold call terminal with, you know, like Vancouver terminal, November 629 gazillion such VFR request, go ahead. You know, requesting present decision direct, whatever, what altitude, then they'll give you the clearance, give them it back again with the call sign at the end. But when you talk to the tower, when they clear you to left base and all that good stuff, all you have to do is give you your ident back again.
Just acknowledge it.
Sorry?
Just acknowledge it.
Just acknowledge that you talk to, and when you get to the apron, it's not controlled, and some of the airports, which
So
Langley,
taxiways are, but once you get on the apron, it's not. Yeah.
and some of the airports, which is Abbotsford and Langley, are now asking you to do your run-up before you even call ground control.
And battery.
So, anything else that we missed?
Not related, but half of us in here are or soon will be on basic med only. When can we legally come to Canada?
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
That's beyond
We
me.
were talking about that at dinner, and I haven't heard, and I thought Jim, if anybody heard, he would
Okay.
heard.
Does anybody know? No. Anything else that we've missed?
Maureen?
Do you have movement lines designating your ramp non-contact versus where you cross over?
Just the whole short lines. But once you enter a taxiway, there's nothing that says this is now the apron and now you're on a taxiway.
Okay, because at Bellingham we do,
Yeah,
The tower-controlled airports in the US, there's non-movement areas where you don't have to talk to anybody.
Mhm.
And the movement area, that's from the movement line to the runway, whole short line.
Yeah. You see some of them, like Pitt Metals has them now,
Okay?
where if you enter into a certain taxiway, it looks like, and it's hitting us by surprise. People think, this must be the beginning of the runway. No, it's the beginning of the taxiway. So they have it, I think, for Alpha now. But like at Boundary Bay, is lucky that you got any markings on the ground, let alone.
So you can just taxi to the runway, whole short
Well,
line. right?
you can talk to them, they'll just say taxi the ramp, your discretion. But, which is fine, it's good to do that, and stay on ground, because sometimes they will call you because
Yeah.
some reason.
Sure.
So, yeah, you can monitor ground.
But like, say somebody wanted to get some gas, some fuel, they can go to the pump without calling anybody.
Mhm.
Right.
One of them is the flight service frequencies, which we, commonly in the US, 122.2 or 126.7 are the sort of basics, but in Canada you have two unique frequencies for flight service.
Yeah, so we use 126.7, right? And that's the common one. And then because it's so busy, when you go over, you'll see a solid box around like a VOR or something. The solid box means that it has 126.7, 121.5, and then 243.0 for the military airplanes. But then it will also have another one on top, and that is a one for that area. So it'd be a discretional one for that area. Just, you can go on 126.7, it's just that you get up high enough, you hear everybody from all over the place.
Well, the
right?
other thing which has recently happened is 126.7s are now becoming what they call broadcast only. And you will see 1267 BCST in parentheses. You can't talk to anybody there. You can talk, you can give position reports, but you will have an alternate frequency. So make sure you double check that. Don't assume that, especially the RCOs, remote communication outlets, they've now reconfigured those. You probably know about that. And there's a whole brochure. If anybody's interested, send me an email and I'll send you that. But what they've done is now, most of them have decommissioned doing the flight information center calling on 1267. So you'll just make broadcast only. You might, get SIGMETs and stuff. They may do that. But if you actually want to call flight information center, look for those brackets like he's saying, but look for that alternate frequency. And especially at the bottom, it will say 126.7 BCST in parentheses, which means broadcast only, which means they're not going to listen for that.
But, like when we were in uncontrolled airspace, IFR, we broadcast on 126.7. Because
That's where I keep my, if I have two radios, one's on 121.5, and if I'm en route and I have nobody to talk to, I'll have 126.7. And then once I know somebody I have to talk to, I'll give the real name.
Yeah. And a lot of that, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you were going to mention, or have we already, that if you file a flight plan, they will open it?
Oh, yeah.
Has that been?
Automatic.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you file a flight plan, so when you go, and your wife gives you a 4 flight for Christmas, and you go, and you file a flight plan, that airplane now departed that airport at the time that you filed that flight plan, and
Yeah,
it's
your departure
airborne as
time.
far as the
Yeah.
flight alerting system is concerned.
Assumed off.
And when it doesn't arrive, you'll get a phone call saying, you were supposed to land in Kamloops an hour ago, and you go, so yeah, you gotta be careful. Towers are not obligated to close your flight plan, so don't assume they do.
How about for IFAR?
IFRs do.
IFR they do.
And
But they-
IFR departures, he's talking VFR only, the
Yeah.
automatic opening is only for VFR.
Okay.
But the towers will always, especially for you when you're visiting, they'll offer to account. So every once in a while, you'll get some grumpy guys say, no, I won't. But you have to request it in a nice way, because at one time, tower controllers always closed your flight plans. They just did, it was part of their job. Then, for whatever reason, they separated it and you have to phone flight service. But we've come back now. I would say 95% of the time, the controller is asking, can I close your flight plan for you?
Yeah, and I actually asked when I was up at the control tower about that. It's like, does that annoy you when we ask you to close the flight plan? Sometimes they offer it. And he says, no, but it used to be, the reason they were turning it down is they literally had to go pick up a phone and call the same number you would have to call, so it was too much work. Now they can actually literally just click a button and it's all done. So it's easier for them now, so that's why, there was a whole time where they did it, it was so nice, then they just refused to. And it's like, well, I wonder why. So that's at least the story they told me.
Yeah, which is true. Now it's all being automated. You know, we gotta get ready for automation like this. You know, like for instance, filing flight plans. I get to see all the different schools. Like there's schools still using E6Bs, logging everything all out, and there's some schools that are showing up with things on ForeFlight, completely all done, and that's allowed. There's schools that are filing completely online, and there's some that are still in queue. You know, you are now 4 away from talking to a flight service specialist, and you know, and what's your equipment? I think it's Charlie / I don't know. And then so that I think is going to go, because I look at the schools that just go, and you got, you know, like student pilots that are just hitting the little button and filing flight plans because they're so used to it, right? I mean, this is all they do. They live on their mobile devices. So
Yeah.
things are changing pretty quick. But be careful about an inadvertent filing, because I've had them.
VFR.
Yeah, I've had that for me. Like I've done a flight test, and I said to the candidate, do this, and then what they do is they fill out a flight plan. I said, and then maybe I used the term file a flight plan or something. And I landed, and the tower controller said, guess what, sweetheart? You know, we've been looking for you for the last hour. You were supposed to be up in Powell River or wherever this flight plan was. And
So doesn't the flight plan have a departure time on it?
Yeah, that's when it's automatically open. When you put your departure time, it will automatically open at that time, not when you file.
Right.
But as soon as,
yeah.
unless you cancel before that departure time,
Yeah, okay, fine.
they assume, they call it an assumed departure, and they will open it at that time.
so what the candidate did is he actually filed the flight plan.
Yeah.
We took off, we went somewhere else, and when we came back, we got the scolding, right? Because the flight plan had gone through the system and nobody arrived at the other end and nobody closed it. So,
Oops.
go ahead.
The US waives the ICAO requirement for radio operators licenses and radio station licenses, but I've been told that Canada does not, so we gotta have them.
It's kind of about crossing the border, is what I understand. We don't require them.
For your own pilots,
In
you don't have
Canada,
them.
no, but if you cross the border, they say that, I don't know if customs requires it.
This is the airport, the airplane radio license, right?
And radio station license.
Both, there's an operator license and a radio station license, so one for the plane, one for the pilot. The US requires neither flying domestically.
Do you have to get it originally? We
Well,
have
I mean,
to get,
I got the radio operator's
yeah, I mean,
license
we
'cause
get
I
a
didn't know any
radio
better.
operator's license, but it's issued by a different
Yeah,
authorizing agency, so nobody checks it.
right, ours is
So-
as well.
Yeah, so no, but don't expect if you get a ramp check, they're not gonna ask for your radio license.
What about for the plane?
The radio station license, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is only if you cross the border. We don't require it in
Well, I
Canada,
mean, if we're flying in.
and you don't, but if you fly, I don't know. I don't think so. They don't
I did
require-
mine just before COVID, and I acquired the ship station license, made all the inquiries, said no, you need it.
And they said you need,
No,
yeah,
and
that's what I
then
heard.
COVID hit, I don't know if it's happened
Yeah,
3
if
years.
you cross, I would say if you're gonna cross a border,
We
You should
still
have
need a radio telephone
Yeah.
operator's permit, you have to have that
Also.
with you when you fly to Canada.
no, the operator's license.
Yeah, yeah, you do. Yeah, we do, at least, we're required to take it,
No.
and I'm with you, though, I don't know if anybody ever checked it, but
Yeah.
apparently
Nobody's
it's still
ever checked it, but
required.
I agree with him.
Yeah.
So how it
Regulations
works
say
is that the station license is required, it's a listed required document to enter the United States from Canada. So I don't know how it is the other way, but that's what it is. The Industry Canada regulates the frequency bands. Industry Canada issues the restricted operator certificates. Transport Canada doesn't do inspections on them, but Industry Canada could.
Yeah, I think that's the
That's
issue, I
probably
don't
why.
think it's
No, you're
transport,
probably
I
right.
think it's the other agency, and they aren't talking to each
Yeah,
other.
no, I have heard of Industry Canada, but this is a long time ago, going around asking to see people's radio license, like up at, Chilliwack and stuff, they'll go up there and just ask for them. But Transport Canada won't, and, or with Customs.
Wonder what they do, I don't have.
Customs
I
don't even
think-
know
I
you
think
have a
we're-
radio.
Sorry?
Say Customs doesn't even know you have a radio.
Yeah.
The reason we still have to carry them when we fly up there at the horizon is because if something happens, you get in an accident or you get violated or something like that, somebody's gonna check all your P's and Q's.
Yeah, that's correct, you're 100% right, you're
Yeah.
100%
And that's
right.
your operator's license.
Yeah, on your personal.
But I know that the flying schools won't send the students solo until they've got their student pilot permit and their radio license. And in Canada now, they have to have obtained their language proficiency test.
That's required across the border as well.
Yeah.
Your US license should have English competency on the back. It costs an extra $5 to request that from the FAA unless it's already on your license.
Yeah, we got a weird one in Canada though, but you can get, I used to be an English examiner, I gave it up because the people that were monitoring me couldn't pass it because they could get it in French. Because it's language proficiency, not English proficiency in Canada. And everybody that was administering the program spoke with such a broken English. Yet they were saying, you can't make this person an expert. And I'm thinking, I wouldn't make you an expert.
The English proficiency is actually an ICAO rule.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's not,
Maureen, you
it's
have
not
something?
Canadian.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody, if you plan to go up and you're doing your EAPIS, be sure to give yourself time and register for your EAPIS and get it, because it doesn't happen in 15 minutes, so you have to do that ahead of time.
And EAPIS is US, it's not required in Canada, that's,
But you have to come
yeah,
back.
you've got, yeah,
Assuming
you
you're
definitely have to
coming
do
back.
it.
That's it.
But,
Just one point on EAPIS, the one change, or two changes, the one that affects it, you no longer have to file a departure message from the US.
You said, when did that change?
January of last year.
Oh, great.
Now, how do I find it? Because I was just on the site here recently and it still has the form to fill out for departures.
No departure, and the other thing, they used to encourage everybody with you, list them as crew, so that they would stay, they'd be recorded in your,
that's
Yeah.
it, so you don't have to enter all their stuff.
now, there's one crew unless there's two pilots.
Yeah, and then the rest are passengers, right?
The passengers are now remembered in the system,
Oh, yeah, okay.
so those two change.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So you're saying Canada doesn't want the EAPIS for us to fly into Canada, but the US wants the EAPIS for us to fly into Canada?
It is an it's an FAA thing.
Right, for us to
So
leave the
Canada
US.
doesn't see EAPIS, so whatever EAPIS is required by the US.
US no longer requires an EAPIS departure message from
Oh,
the
okay.
US. Okay,
But you do need an EAPIS for returning to the US.
that, you need that.
Okay.
I thought you had to have both departure and arrival.
Because to see at one time you had to give a crossing time, right?
Mhm.
You still
Yes.
do.
And
And
it's still,
flights.
it's not a violation to go ahead and file a departure. It's just not required.
Okay, interesting.
Good news.
So anything else then?
You need a flight plan still, of course.
Yeah.
And
If I
crossing.
understand correctly, you said that so I fly club planes, and I don't know, coming into Canada, nobody's gonna ask me for a letter showing the club's approval for me to
I
fly.
would say, I don't know, has anybody flown a club plane? I would say carry a letter
Better to have it.
from whoever is the president of your club
Yeah.
saying, this person is a member of the club and is authorized to fly this plane.
I just know that going into the United States, it's been a huge issue on who owns this airplane. You're not on the C of A. Who are
Especially
you?
clubs
Who are you?
partnership.
Who gives you the right to
We're
use
wound
it?
pretty tight, yeah.
Sorry?
We're wound pretty tight.
Depends who you get, right? It depends who you get. I mean, you got some of the nicest people.
I will
down
say
there.
that my plane, I call it, I always tell my students, I joke about it, I call it my plane, but it's actually registered in the name of a partnership because we now have 3 partners. They've never asked me, I don't have a letter. And it says Yankees are listing Inc. and it's a partnership.
But you could write yourself a letter.
I could write myself a letter because I'm a director, yes, exactly.
You can't come back, or you can't go from Canada to the US with a temporary registration.
Correct.
That's illegal.
What do you say, temporary?
Or a
A
permit,
temporary registration, you can't
Yeah.
cross the
Oh,
border.
okay, got it.
and
Hey.
permits are,
Here's a question. The decal that you need down here, right?
Mhm.
they
Can
call it decal. That's all they call it.
Is it okay to have applied for it and have the application or? do
The
you-
receipt.
Yeah, the receipt
That's all you
that
need.
says you paid for it, and you can get that online, I've done that before.
As soon as you fill out the application and they accept your credit card online, you can print a receipt. The
And that's
receipt is
that-
all you
that's-
need,
It's on you.
and I've had times where I've never even received the decal from
What was
Detox.
the
It never
purpose of
came,
it anyway then?
who knows? And I don't stick it on the outside of my airplane because I'm not gonna stick
I've
it
got
on the
mine
paint.
inside the door,
I
and
put
it
it on the
clearly
inside
says
of the bag
outside,
door.
I just have it inside the
Yeah,
door.
but what was the
22
idea
bags.
of it?
Well, the idea, it's just a fee for crossing the border. Trucks, if you look at all the commercial trucks, they all have the decals on the trucks. And it was just another way of collecting a tax. The bottom line is, it's just a carryover from that system. And they can charge you, I think it's $28 and plus tax
Okay,
now
yeah.
for the decal, but
It's like a fishing license, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you can also tape a couple of 20s to the inside of your baggage compartment.
one of the difficulties
It's
is.
only going into
$100
Mexico.
bills and they
Try to see that.
So just from my point of view, crossing the border, the customs into the United States, because when you guys come back, is there anything there that you have noticed?
One of the changes was you used to be able to arrive in Bellingham and buy your decal on the spot. They didn't have the decal, but they give you a receipt. The guy would sit there and he'd get onto his computer and fill it out. No more. If you arrive in Bellingham or some other place and you don't have it, they make you get out your cell phone or your iPad and get online and you do it. And if you ever tried to do that form on your iPad, Bill, how long did it take you?
Oh, over an hour.
Yeah, and I sat there, they told me, well, 'cause I was just a passenger in the airplane, or actually I was the pilot, I didn't own the airplane. I could leave, Bill had to sit there and fill out the form. Where do I go?
Well, I
His
needed
airplane.
to ride home,
I could have walked home, but yeah, please, for anybody,
My mistake.
get the decal in advance. Get the receipt is good enough. You don't have to wait for the other one to come in
Keep
the
a copy
mail.
on your iPad, that's what I do, as soon as I get the receipt, I put it on my iPad.
So the next question is, has anybody called down to like Bellingham or stuff like that and had major, like, sorry, we can't handle you this morning or anything?
Just check the times because the winter and summer hours are different. The other is now Skagit Bayview also has customs, but I would be very careful to check in advance and find out whether there's a call-out fee.
And the quarters in Friday Harbor are also, and Bellingham has been the least friendly bunch,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
Agree with that.
Call them
depends.
the
For a
day
while,
of.
they were really friendly, and in fact, the border guard is one of my neighbors now, and it's like, why aren't you in there? I just
Which
show
one?
up, I don't know, I'm like, why aren't you? He said like, oh, you're the one that would come with your little dog in the red and white plane. It's like, yeah, that was me, but then when he retired, But now they've been really friendly lately, I don't know.
Yeah, the,
Morning, what do you think?
Yeah, that reminds me, if you do take a dog up, you have to have, I don't remember what it is anymore, but I think you have
Technically
to have.
rabies is the only
Yeah,
thing.
but you have to have all that registration
I've never
stuff.
been asked for it in crossing the border all the time, and I always have my dog with me. I think one time they said, do you have your rabies certificate for your dog? I reached for my iPad and said, sure, I've got it right there, and they said, that's okay. They let me go. I always called her my border guard charmer, because they see that cute little dog and they usually let me go.
But Friday Harbor has customs, but you said Anacortes is gonna get it too?
Anacortes has it.
Friday Harbor, you wanna call for availability, but they're pretty friendly,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll come out to the airport, and there's an area marked for customs. If you're like me, you find it fatiguing, some of the hoops you gotta jump through to cross the border legally. So I recommend doing it all the night before, except for Bellingham Customs. You need to call them the day of, and at least 1 hour before you're gonna do it.
You know, we're all talking necessarily, colloquially here about this area, but what happens when you get outside of this area and across Canada-US border by airplane everywhere from Bangor, Maine to Bellingham? And some of the areas, particularly around the Great Lakes, it gets very difficult to find a place that will clear US Customs that doesn't have a user fee, because some places have what's called a user fee where somebody else clears you through customs, not a customs person, and they charge for it. And other places have landing fees at the airport. So to find a place where you're not paying a landing fee or not paying a user fee, you gotta be really careful. And so do a lot of homework when you're outside in the remote areas as to what airport you choose. Airports that have what's called landing rights. Bellingham is a landing rights airport. Customs will be available during their hours and there's no fee, but there's other airports that aren't landing rights airports that have customs, and you've got to be extremely careful as to how and when you go there. So that would be the main issue. If you're not in this general area, check, read up, find out, make phone calls.
Come to the meeting next month because he's going to be talking about that very thing, going into the Bahamas,
Yeah.
landing fees, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a funny one for you.
You do see landing fees coming into the US at a lot of airports, trying to find one. Coming out of Windsor, Ontario, I ended up going north to one of the Detroit city airports to clear customs, and then turning around and flying right back over the Windsor airport to go south. Tell me, does that make sense? I had to go north to clear US Customs, because of the way the river runs.
Yeah.
What are the vaccine requirements?
That
We don't have them now.
we used to, but
What?
they're all lifted now. There are none.
Because it was, you had to have a vaccine to get
Yeah,
into the
used
United
to be.
States. That's been dropped?
Oh, I mean, Canada,
Only from Europe
yeah.
or other nations, not
So
from.
you
We're
guys
Canadian.
fly back and forth to Canada without
It's not
vaccine
required.
passport?
Got a bunch of truckers who would cause a bunch of ruckus up and all
Yeah.
along. And about 3 weeks later, everything changed, so.
Yeah, they had that whole ArriveCan app, and you had to upload your vaccine
Don't do
card.
it driving.
That's all done.
You do it when you're flying.
So I walked into customs at the Bellingham Airport
Yeah, we
and told them that I'm here to give you notification that the wife and I are heading over to Victoria for the day, and that we'll be arriving back here at 5 o'clock
In 2
in
hours, yeah.
Victoria. He says, well, you'll have to call us.
Yeah.
And so I pulled out my cell phone and I said, okay, is that guy sitting over there? Can you answer?
They want to record it, do they?
And
Oh,
so,
maybe that's
and
it.
so he pulls out a paper, puts it on there, okay, give me your information. So I gave him the information. And as I'm leaving, he goes, 5 o'clock, that's quite a while from now. A lot could change between now and then. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if it does,
I'll
call you.
That's great.
So any final words on anything there?
Does anybody want to sign wings that didn't get a chance to do it?
No, he's signing.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I've learned as
There's
much
this
from
one.
being down here as hopefully So just get the circuit pattern right up there. And just do your homework before you go into the controlled airport.
You gave 2 rides today, and you're still working at 9 o'clock, you're gonna sleep well.
I hopefully you'll get home before he's
Let her drive.
Well, you know something?
He's going that way, I'm going that way.
The one was a multi, and I said to the guy, yesterday,